Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here, and in today's video I want to talk about a possible change that I think the Washington Commanders might need to make going into this week 3 game against the Las Vegas Raiders. If you guys are new, do all that good stuff, subscribe, like button, notification bell as well. We're close to 16k subscribers. Share the video, let's help out the algorithm, get this video going. So yeah, Jaden Daniels, he's question mark for this game. As we all know, I still think there's a chance he plays this week. I know most people think it'll be a 1 or 2 week thing, but the Commanders, if it was serious or even, multi-week injury, I believe they would have said week to week or even said long shot for him to play, but all the reports were that, it's a very short-term thing. But that doesn't mean if he plays, he's not going to be banged up. Because he probably he will be banged up. He's going to be playing with the brace if he plays on Sunday. If he doesn't play on Sunday, this Sunday, next Sunday, if he plays, he's going to be wearing a brace too, and that limits his mobility, and the injury itself limits his mobility. So Josh Conerly has struggled so far. It's objective. He's struggled. Though he has gone up against some really good pass rushers, Brian Burns, Micah Parsons. But the problem is he's going up against Max Crosby this week. And they're definitely going to be lining him up, Max Crosby, across from Josh Conerly. And that is an issue. That is an issue for sure. And the Commanders are going to be in trouble if that's the matchup the whole game, because Josh Conerly is not going to be able to handle Max Crosby. And, he already got sacked, a decent amount and a lot of pressure and a lot of hits last week against the Packers. But imagine the, less mobility, the same type of pass rusher, in terms of the tier. Micah's better than Max, but Max is up there with one of the best pass rushers in the league. So having him go up against Josh Conerly is just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. I would not play Jaden if you're starting Conerly. And I know that's not how the decision making is going to work. Obviously, if Jaden's good, they're going to play him. But I would say if Jaden's playing, I much rather have Andrew Wylie out there at right tackle and, protecting Jaden than Josh Conerly, who, has definitely struggled so far. And this doesn't mean I'm giving up on him or anything like that, but it does it just shows that I care more about the franchise quarterback than the franchise tackle. And, Jaden's health really, really matters. So if you want to go ahead and have him sit for this week and Marcus Mariota start, that's fine. But if you're starting him, you want to have the best offensive line out there possible. And I was already saying that this should be something that they should consider. It would have been really good if this week 3, they were playing a team with no pass rushers no elite pass rushers, and you give Conerly a little bit more time to kind of just adjust to the NFL, adjust to the new position. Some people are saying they should move him inside. I disagree with that. He's a left tackle. They already moved him to right tackle. He's getting used to that position. Now you want to move him inside? Heck no. I think that would be an awful move to move him inside. Maybe that's something long term you can do, but I would only do that after tackle doesn't work. If tackle doesn't work, then maybe maybe you can move him inside like they did with Coleman, even though it's not like Coleman didn't work at tackle. So that's kind of where I'm at, with this Conerly situation. The first couple weeks, it just hasn't been pretty for him. It really hasn't. We'll go ahead and look up, Josh Conerly, just look up some stats, but it hasn't been pretty, and the Commanders need a win. And, this week, maybe they'll be able to win against, the Raiders with Conerly there and with, Jaden out, or even with Jaden and Conerly there at the same time. But in terms of protecting your franchise quarterback, maybe giving Conerly a little bit more time to develop is the right move. But then the, flip side is, all right, if you do bench him, what does that do to his confidence? That is, also something to consider. So against the Giants, I think the stats were a little bit misleading here. I think 1 sack, one of them maybe got called back. I know he had at least 1 holding, maybe 2. You see the other stats right there. Against the Packers, it was a different story. 3 sacks according to, I don't know what site, but this tweet, and 9 pressures, 5. It just wasn't good. And, he's still learning. He's still adjusting. I'm not saying he's a bust at all, but I am saying that it might be time to, maybe start Andrew Wylie for a little bit until Conerly gets back, into things, and not back into things, but just starts developing a little bit more and gets used to the position a little bit more. I saw people talk about it. Maybe they, it would have been cool if they kind of did that thing where that last year with, Cornelius Lucas and Brandon Coleman, where it was a little bit of a rotation. It was a little bit weird. I wasn't a huge fan of it at the time, but it was a good way to ease Brandon Coleman into it. So, maybe that's something they could have done with Conerly, but, they thought he was ready, and it's super, super early. Tackle is a position where it's hard to ball out right away in the NFL, especially if you're not a top 5, top 10 pick. So we definitely understand, what's happening with Conerly right now. It's a process, but then at the same time, you have Jaden, who's hurt in this game, and it's just not a good combination to have. Real quick, a word from today's sponsor. And a huge shout out to Sleeper for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you guys go ahead and check them out. They got fantasy sports leagues, a bunch of, breaking news on there, and also you can win real money with picks, which I have done each week. So make sure you guys follow my picks. You guys can tail the picks as well. Use my code Pedro on Sleeper and get a 100% match up to $100. You put in 10, you'll get 20. And yeah, link in the description. Terms and conditions apply. All right, and again, a huge shout out to Sleeper. Going to be doing my picks later this week. Have gotten a winning pick each week, so make sure you guys check them out. Link in the description. But Conerly, like I said, he's still gonna be, hopefully gonna be good. Didn't hate the pick when it happened. Maybe there was another good tackle there, Josh Simmons. Maybe you could have gone edge, but protecting your franchise quarterback is always, a great thing to do. And, but at the same time, protecting your franchise quarterback this week might be benching Josh Conerly. Jay Gruden said he thinks that Andrew Wylie should start over Josh Conerly, and that makes sense. You can watch this video here on Twitter, Grant Paulson's Twitter there, and I'll read one of the quotes. He said, yes, 100%, I have to consider that. After watching the film of the first 2 weeks, at some point, Andrew Wylie played pretty good at right tackle last year. I would not hesitate to put him in there at right tackle. Let Conerly be the backup swing tackle for a few weeks and see what happens. Just give him time to get better. And that is true. He can be a backup swing tackle, and, that will still give him some reps, and he's not going to be in there obviously the whole time, but he's going to be in there 10-ish snaps or something in a game, and that gives him a little bit more time to develop. But then it also is a matter of the confidence thing. So also if it's a blowout, let's say the Commanders are demolishing the Raiders, then why not take out Jaden for sure if he's in the game, and then also put in Josh Conerly, give him those reps. Hopefully they do destroy the Raiders. The Raiders did not look good yesterday on Monday Night Football, and I'm going to make a separate video about this, but the Commanders have a big advantage going into this game, the rest and other things as well that I'll talk about in that other video. But they should definitely win this game. It's at home too, and the Raiders have to travel, so far distance. And this could be a really, really good opportunity for the Commanders, potentially to rest Jaden Daniels, give him 17 days off until that next game against the Atlanta Falcons. I still, though, do believe Jaden Daniels will play in this game, and is going to be limited for sure, but I think he will play. It seems like a very, very light sprain. There is, if it is a somewhat of a significant sprain, then obviously that stuff can lead to increase the chances of a sprain MCL, or I don't know, an MCL injury, an ACL injury, stuff like that. It can make it, the chances of that a lot higher. So you don't want that to happen. If there's chances of that, then yes, sit him for this week, even next week if necessary. But I think he's going to be good to go for this game. When tomorrow will be telling, I would be very surprised if he's a full participant. My guess is he's a limited or, a DMP Thursday. If he's not a limited, then he's going to be out for the game. Friday, he's got to be a limited, of course, or he's going to be out for the game. So yeah, that's kind of my guess on the whole situation there. But yeah, it does suck to potentially bench your first round rookie, but it might be necessary in terms of protecting your franchise quarterback and even your backup. Like if Mariota's playing, like you still want him healthy and you still want the best line play possible. Yes, you want, sometimes you try to sacrifice what good your team's playing or whatever for a young player to develop, but it gets to a point where the the benefit of doing that is outweighed by the negative, especially at a position like line where one guy not playing well can absolutely kill your team versus defensive linemen. If one defensive lineman isn't getting to the quarterback, it's not the end of the world. But if one offensive lineman is playing terrible and just getting worked all day, that's really bad for the opposing offense. But that is it for today's video. Just wanted to talk about that, and it definitely, I believe it's something that's in play for the Commanders this Sunday. We'll see if they end up doing it. If he plays really poorly to start out the game, I'm sure Andrew Wylie will be in there pretty quickly. But thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.